So with that, let's move to some visions of success. In terms of general principles, and these are just mine, this is not on behalf of the Association of State Floodplain Managers or our board or on behalf of the Committee on Levee Safety, but generally, these are some principles to be considered. Principles of equity, both geographic equity, those who choose to stay living at risk should be those who pay for that protection. The geographic equity equation is an important one. I would also emphasize intergenerational equity as well. And this was really brought home to me during recent visits with the Dutch. They have a millennia of experience dealing with this issue for their own country, it being a matter of national survival. And they really emphasize the intergenerational aspects. In other words, future generations should not bear the burden of the development or infrastructure decisions that we make today. Also, issues of sustainability, both environmental and economic sustainability, because it does need to go both ways. We almost cannot have a thriving environment without a thriving economy, and the opposite is probably true as well. And principles of resiliency, looking at today's hazards as well as those that are foreseeable. So these are some principles of success to think about that may help drive a vision of success, where we can be before the next big levee failure, that we have completed an inventory of all levees in the nation, that we have robust levee programs in every state, that there are incentives and disincentives in place that drive smart action at the state and local government levels, that there is a public understanding and acceptance of residual risk, that we have improved levels of protection and strength in areas that most need them. In other words, if we're not going to relocate the city of New Orleans intact, we probably need to invest as a nation in protecting it, but there will not be the funding to take that approach to every levee across the nation. In this vision of success, we will have figured out those conditions and those priorities and those thresholds. Non-structural measures are fully integrated, national standards and codes are in place and performing, and clear roles in risk reduction are understood and active. So how do we get there? Well, again, we've got the two sides of the risk equation. We have the hazard and we have the consequences. We know that we need to increase design standards and we need to improve structural performance where that's going to be necessary. We also know, however, that we won't be able to achieve that across the nation. The funding is simply not going to be there to get every levee and every circumstance and every system up to what the folks living and working behind it think it should be. We're going to have to consider gradually relocating families and businesses from some of these levied areas to restore floodplain function and to steer new development from those flood-prone areas and to have adjustments for sea level rise and changing precip patterns. What I would emphasize here is that we're going to have to differentiate our policy approaches between existing investment at risk and future development. We're talking about navigating the turn here, right? What we're trying to turn is an aircraft carrier. It's going to take some time. We didn't get here overnight. It took us 250 years or longer as a nation to get in our current state of vulnerability. Let's not take 250 years to correct it, but because it will take time, we need to begin today. And that means taking one approach with what we have at risk already and recognizing that we've invested in those locations, that those families and businesses were told this levee will protect you, you will not need flood insurance, and that they made assumptions and decisions about their single biggest investment being their home on the basis of those assurances. We heard earlier about how this is an emotional issue. We need to acknowledge that folks are going to feel a little disillusioned, maybe more than a little, when they're told for the first time that they are at risk and that they need flood insurance. There's going to be tremendous public resistance to that. We need to be honest about it. We need to deal with the existing assets, the existing investments that are at risk. We're going to need to make some strategic investments, complement those with non-structural measures, and perform O&M. In terms of future development, this is where we can begin to turn the aircraft carrier and have some real impact with the uses of strategic land use and zoning, being smarter with the siting, not just the design, but the siting of projects, all with an eye toward resiliency. The National Committee on Levee Safety recommendations are an excellent start, and I want to acknowledge the many fellow members of that committee that are here in the room. I also want to draw this group's attention to an opportunity to provide one-on-one feedback to members of the National Committee on Levee Safety today at noon in its listening session in the Clements Room. ASFPM, of course, supports much of the recommendations in that report. We've got a lot of common ground with that committee. There's also a need to look at land use requirements and fully integrate the recommendations of the Committee on Levee Safety in a more complete overall flood risk management approach for the nation. To integrate climate adaptation measures, pursue those alternatives to structural approaches, and to immediately look at what can be done to curtail continued federal activities and investment that contribute to risk. So we have real challenges, and I would urge the states and regions and local government leaders here to take this message back. There are things that you can be doing today. You don't have to wait for the next WRDA. You don't have to wait for the NFIP to be reauthorized. We are state and local floodplain managers, so take this back. Funding will be a challenge. Prioritization will be a challenge. Competition among all classes of aging infrastructure will be challenges. But there are real opportunities. The same things that have been working to protect the nation and reduce risk today need to be emphasized and efforts redoubled to go back and do this behind levees today and tomorrow. No adverse impact is there for you, and we anticipate as an association doing some continued work on that in the coming fiscal year and beyond. Adopt standards and enforce them equitably, and identify and reduce your legal liability. Manage resources and plan on a watershed basis. Reach up and downstream with your partners. Integrate plans and activities to reflect all of the hazards, and again, go for those actions that give you multiple benefit. Permanently restore and preserve those flood-prone areas as open space, and anticipate future development, taking climate change into account, and site critical facilities and important new developments out of harm's way. In conclusion, this is about building resilient communities. We know that extreme events are on the rise. They are extraordinarily disruptive and foster misery. They also are economically disruptive, and many communities and commerce do not return after a disaster. But resilience is built not at the federal level. It is built at the community level. Resilience requires participation of all sectors. So be thinking about public-private partnerships and reaching across jurisdictions. Be thinking about silver jackets. And identify where you have common interests and goals. Here we have someone working to get to work, trying to cross a busy street, and the poor little crawdad is just trying to get back to the channel. So identify where you have those common interests and goals and work together to get there. Most importantly, don't forget that your association is here to help you get there. Thank you very much.